Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in bountiful Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and we continue Paranormal October with another local paranormal investigator who is also an assistant principal, Missy Bennett. She's the founder and lead investigator for Frontier Ghost Hunters, and we were really intrigued that she had these two different roles that she plays, and so we invited her on the show. And before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. Really fun to be doing Paranormal October again. Next week, Chris and I will be doing our own show. We haven't quite fully decided on what topic yet, but since we have the extra Tuesday, we thought we'd do something just our own. And then we're going to end the month with Holly Lindblom, from our good friend from Holly's Haunts, and she'll be here. We have some great shows coming up next month as well. We have Lama Kathy Wesley to give us a Buddhist talk, and a new friend of ours, Tony Lee, who's going to talk about Universal Unitarianism. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. And while you're there, if you can afford to, please buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. Helps us cover our cost. And then thank you to all of you who have supported us by purchasing our new book on Amazon that just came out, Tarot Alchemy, a Kabbalistic approach to and reading the cards. So it's write your book and you can't even remember your own title. So very funny. So anyway, but thank you all for that. And we appreciate it. So I don't want to take too much more time. So I'm going to kick it back to you guys. So take it away, Krista and Missy.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and welcome, Missy.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, good. We're excited to have you. Yeah, I remember when I first came to Bakersfield, we started looking for people in Bakersfield to come on the show, the local paranormal people. And I remember seeing your name and thinking it was cool. Then I forgot. And then Michael found you separately on his own. And I said, oh, that's the lady I thought would be good on the show. So,
well, I'm glad it came back around full circle then.
It did. So how did you first get involved with the paranormal?
I think like most people, I had an experience as a kid. I was probably about 8 years old and just bought in immediately. So I just always knew that there were spirit, haunting, paranormal existence, but it wasn't until probably about 12 years ago that I really got into it and thought, you know what, I can do this. Like I can figure this out on my own and investigate this. And of course, that's when all of the paranormal shows were coming on. And so you get to see different strategies that different teams take. And so you just kind of go from there.
Do you have a favorite show that influenced you?
I really did like Ghost Hunters with Jason and Grant when they first started. Yeah.
They're definitely big up there with influencing people. So, and are you from this area? Did you move to this area, the Kern County area?
Both. I know that sounds weird, but I was born and raised here and then moved away when my dad joined the Army when I was 12. And came back here because it's just always been considered home for me. So I came back here to go to college at CSUB, met my husband, and all she wrote.
So you've been here a while then.
Yeah, over 30 years.
It seems pretty, so far what I learned about the paranormal here, it seems like people are pretty open-minded about it, and it seems to have a lot of diverse places that are supposedly haunted.
Right.
And it seems like it has a community of people.
I think so, and I'm just starting to realize just a little bit, how much bigger it is than I originally thought.
Yeah, I think that is one of the benefits of social media. When I first started doing this show and we were looking at people to invite on into the paranormal world, I was amazed at how many people do it just in the United States alone. And I mean, and they really they're serious about it.
Yeah.
And some of them had very small Instagram accounts, some had large. And I found that really cool, actually, that there were that many people interested in, the afterlife and hauntings and things like that. It seems to me, and let me give me your opinion. It seems to me it's been growing, the interest in the paranormal, at least on a public level.
I think so. And I do contribute that a little bit to television and the reality TV shows with these investigation teams. There are so many to choose from. And I think that makes people who do believe feel a little less crazy for believing. Do you know what I mean? And so when you have other people that share the same interest, it's a little bit easier to talk about.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that people are more relaxed about. It isn't seen quite as strange.
Right.
So how do your friends and family relate to it with you?
I would say the majority of them think that it's amazing and it's so cool and that's awesome and I can't wait to hear all about it. And then it's like, well, do you want to come on one? Oh, absolutely not. So it's like I like it from afar, but many of them are believers, and if not, there's no judgment because they aren't and I am. So that's nice.
So, and also since you're an assistant principal, what do your students think about it?
So when I was still teaching, I started a club. So I had a little ghost hunting club at my high school. And some parents thought that we were satanic worshipers, and some parents asked if they could chaperone, you know. But when the club first was announced, I think I probably had about 100 kids cram into my classroom. And I was like, I love your enthusiasm. I just can't take all of you on one investigation. So then it became like a lottery each time we had one. But for the most part, I think that students are intrigued. They really want to learn how to do it and understand it. And it's great. So it is always kind of my little claim to fame. What's one thing about you that nobody knows or that people would want to know? And this is always what I say. You know, I'm a paranormal investigator, and that it always catches them off guard. I don't know what they expect. But yeah, so I feel like it's pretty well supported.
So when you did take the students on some ghost hunts, how many would you take, and what were their reactions from your point of view?
So it depended on the size of the location. So we did investigate Bakersfield High School, and so I would take a bigger group with me. I would take anywhere from 10 to 15 kids because there were different parts of the campus that we could explore. And then one time we did an overnight investigation at a home, and so I took 5 kids. So it just depends. And then believe it or not, their responses are always much more measured than I expect. So they're calm in a moment where we're having an experience, and that's what happened at BH. Actually, both those investigations that I just mentioned, we actually had real experiences that we couldn't explain away, and the kids were excited about it. They were calm about it. Nobody screamed running out of the room. You know, they were eager to immediately attempt to disprove. So I was really proud of them. It was great.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what happened at Bakersfield High School, at least at one occasion?
So we were at Bakersfield High School, and we were just getting ready to leave. And I have to preface, it was literally like the perfect night, you know, stereotypical night to ghost hunt. It was stormy outside, no rain, but lots of wind, dark clouds, you know, thunder rolling in the background. It was awesome. And so we'd been there for quite some time, and, you know, kids are kids. And as we're getting ready to leave, I had some stragglers behind me. Everybody else was out in the quad waiting, and one of the kids goes, "Miss Bennett, this door's open." And it was one of the classrooms because they're checking all the doors as we're walking through. So we go into this classroom, and it is pitch black, like so dark in there. That was so unusual, and it was really hot. So you know, you start taking I took my coat off, laid it over the chair. Your eyes start to adjust, and you're looking in this classroom, and you can tell that the windows have been covered in some capacity, and so. The teacher's desk is right near the door, and then all the desks are in rows. And there's something hanging from the ceiling. You can just make it out on the far side of the room. So we just kind of start the equipment up. We had digital voice recorders going. We had EMF detectors, and there was probably about 5 of us in the room, maybe 6. And we start walking down the aisle, and me and my she was my, what do you want to call her? President, I guess, of the club, was there, who she later became an investigator with me, which is really cool after she graduated. But anyways, she's walking, and as we're walking, I realized that all of a sudden, like the front of my body was very cold, like drastically different from the heat we had experienced when we walked in. So because I never want to give them any preconceived, you know, notions, I stopped, and then I looked over at her, and she had stopped, and I just asked her, I said, "Why'd you stop?" She goes, "It's freezing back here." I said, you're right. I said, I feel it too. I'm glad you felt it. And I said, let's figure out where it's coming from. So then everybody starts looking for drafts and vents and the AC unit and the heating unit. And that's when we can really tell if the windows are blacked out with paper. No air coming or circulating anywhere. So we couldn't explain that. I looked down at my EMF detector and it is starting to register some activity. And so we just keep, and the kids are starting to do EVP. So they're asking questions, if there's anybody here, can you talk to us? I said, I'm a teacher. These are my students. And we just want to chat. And so as I was turning around the road to come back up towards the front of the room, one of the students says, and we realized that those giant things hanging on the ceiling were like these giant, like 3-dimensional snowflakes students had cut out and put together. And one of the students says, if there's anybody here with us, can you make one of those snowflakes move? And I'm focused on my equipment, so my head is down. And they're like, Bennett. And I'm like, what? I look up and they go, look. And one of the snowflakes was spinning a little bit. I'm like, that's really cool. And I said, one of the kids said, can you make it stop? And it just stopped on a dime.
Wow.
And then another student asked, can you make all of them move? And every single one of those little snowflakes started spinning.
Wow.
I know. I get chills every time I tell that story because it was just the coolest experience. And then somebody said, can you stop? And they all stopped at the same time.
That's a
It was
cool
so
story.
fun.
So playful.
It was so fun. And the kids were so excited about it. And we were all, the energy from us then was just like humming in the room. We were like, this is the best thing ever, And it was so great that they got to experience that. So that was definitely one that we always talk about. It was fantastic.
That is so cool. Now,
Yeah.
is it known to be haunted by a person, or are there stories about Bakersfield High that
There
could
are
be?
a ton of stories. And the funny thing is that Warren Hall isn't usually one of the stories that comes up. So it was interesting that we had it in that building. But they say that there's a couple that can be seen like out in the football stadium who were killed in a car accident that one evening after a game. There's stories of a custodian in Harvey Auditorium. And then people just say that because before it was a school, I guess there used to be military camps there during World War I. And that the quad sometimes they'll have experiences of vision or apparition or something like that. And then there's always the tunnels. You've heard about the Bakersfield tunnels?
We did talk about it a little bit last show, just a bit. So let me know what you know about the tunnels.
Most of the older schools will have the tunnels. I don't think that the high school tunnels are connected to the downtown tunnels that they talk about because it was more of that bomb shelter type era.
Right.
But yeah, so they say that the tunnels, because they're old opium dens and things like that, and the Chinese immigrants were down there, that there was a lot of just shenanigans going on and several deaths. But I have never been able to access them. I thought I was going to be able to do that a couple of weekends ago when I was investigating downtown because they're like, oh, we're right by the tunnels. And I get down there and I'm like, where's the tunnel? She was behind that wall. And I'm like, they boarded that up. And I'm like, darn it.
Yeah, we gathered from Sarah, who was on the show last week, that it was hard to get into the tunnels now, maybe for safety reasons or whatever. But it is kind of intriguing that there are a lot too, right?
I think
quite a bit,
quite a square mile, miles of the downtown area.
So you also started your own investigation organization, Frontier Ghost Hunters. Why did you start that, and what have you done with that group from the very beginning?
So I kept the name and just sort of changed the meaning. So we weren't Frontier High School necessarily anymore, but more of Frontier as in new adventures and investigation and seeking the truth and all of that. And I had some of the students who were still really involved with me doing investigations and kept them on as investigators. And so I just thought it would be, I don't know, fun. I mean, and like you said, there's so many stories about hauntings in town that why not just investigate my own backyard?
Sure.
Rather than, oh, have you been to the Stanley? Have you been to this? Have you been to that? Like, no, I have so many things here that I can try to do. So
that's my impression too. Just a little bit. We've been here and I looked into it. There's a statue that I wanted to.
Garces Circle.
Yeah, that one. I wanted to see if there's anything there. Do you think there's anything there going on with the statue?
I don't know. I used to work right over there and I'd have to hit that circle all the time. I never noticed it. And I always noticed the statue. So it would be really alarming, I think, that he suddenly turned and looked at me while I was driving. So,
Yeah, that's not supposed to be a good thing. So what other places or homes have you investigated since you started doing it more officially?
So the original Bakersfield, Californian building on Truxton Avenue, I was able to get into there, and there's been several stories about the original owner, Alfred Harrell, who was the editor, and of him haunting it. And that was, I can say that I think 100% that that's true. I've done several homes, and I think similar to how you found my name is how they found my name, based on a student newspaper article. And I learned something with every investigation, especially with homeowners, and what their perception is of what's going on. And sometimes their belief is so strong that it can sometimes interfere with an investigation if you're trying to go in as a skeptic.
Yes.
So if you have something unusual that happens to you and you can't explain it away, then does it mean it's haunted? Maybe. But sometimes they buy in so wholeheartedly that it means that everything now is paranormal. Everything that happens in the home, every sound that they hear.
Sure.
When sometimes it can be explained away.
Were they primarily afraid or just more curious, the people that you went and did the investigation for?
Both. I had one woman who pretty much lived in terror. She had a home where her downstairs was an apartment, and then she had this beautiful 2-story upstairs, and she wouldn't even go upstairs.
Oh, wow.
She was so fearful of the things that were happening to her. We found in the home, and this is an educated woman, anesthesiologist, professional, and she had some terrifying stories of being covered in like bug bites when she'd wake up in the morning, or the covers being pulled off of her. She would break out in a rash, things like that. She would hear things, and so we were eager to get in there. We took cameras. We spent the night. She stayed downstairs, and she had, and I'm not saying this is the entire reason, but I do think it was a big reason for things that she was experiencing, is that for whatever reason, she had incredibly high EMF in her home. Anywhere you went, I mean, it was really registering very high. And high EMF can cause symptoms like paranoia and rashes and many of the things that she was experiencing. But it's very difficult to explain that to someone when they believe so much that there's something else in the home. So we didn't get any evidence. We didn't catch anything on video. We didn't catch anything on our digital recorders. Again, it doesn't mean that there's not something there. We just didn't capture it.
That is a common thing, that EMF is associated with hauntings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, like you said, but I've heard that at other places. So I don't know. And there is this sort of magnetic energy in places that creates all kinds of things that could be natural even.
Right.
Like certain places in the world have certain energies we don't understand. And maybe they make portals or maybe they don't. But
Sedona, right? They talk about all the portals in Sedona. Yeah. Anywhere where there's like high amounts of limestone is a conductor. Right. Things like that.
So in her case, did it only start recently, her reaction, or had it been going on for years? Did she tell you?
It had been going on since her mother passed in the home. And so I asked her if she thought that it might be her mother. You also ask, did you buy anything new and bring it into the home if it was an attachment issue? And she says, no, it definitely wasn't my mother. She was happy to die, Right. Sorry if that sounded crude, but that's kind of how she said it. So I said, okay. And no new purchases or anything like that. So I just couldn't explain it.
Sure. Now, what kind of equipment do you really like to use?
There are so many pieces out there, and you'll spend, hundreds and thousands of dollars on them, how badly you want them. And I really do think, and I use several pieces, but my favorite pieces to use are my digital voice recorder and an EMF detector of some sort. My K2 meters are great for yes and no response. Mm-hmm. And I will use a REM pod and put those around. I'll also use those little lighted cat toys, those balls. So if they move, then they start to light up.
Right.
But, you know, I use digital cameras, you know, wireless cameras around. I have geophones, which will measure like vibration if there's footsteps, digital thermometers. There's tons of stuff, but really the only two things that you need, and the only things I have ever really caught good evidence on is that digital voice recorder.
That is very important for serious paranormal investigators. We know some of our friends that have been on the show, and also our friends, they really like the EVP and the captures you can get with it. And
those are hard to disprove. You know?
It is harder to disprove. So what have you captured that you think at times has been really unusual in terms of sound and voices?
So when I was at the Bakersfield Californian, I was trying to separate myself from the group that I had brought. And we were in the very front of the building, which is, you can visualize it, you know, from back when the paper opened. It was where the reporters would all sit behind their cubicles, and it's all this beautiful dark wood. And then above in the back of the room is the editor's office, and he had shuttered windows, so you could just picture him like coming out and screaming at people, "Your deadline's coming up," you know, something like that. So, but just next to that at the back is the stairwell that will take you, what you would think would take you straight up to his office. And it's a pretty good stairwell. So I was like just trying to remove myself from the sound, and I walked up these stairs and was hit with like a door and a window. So I looked through the window, and it looked like the stairwell where we had entered. We had parked in the back of the building and come into this metal stairwell and then up into the floor where the editor's office was. So in my mind at this time, I'm thinking, is this where we started? You know? And I kept trying to figure that out. In the meantime, I'm frustrated because the people that I had brought with me were very noisy. And so you could even hear it in my tone. I was like, "Mr. Harrell, if you're here, can you give me a sign?" You know, like, I'm so tired. Like, and so I keep doing some EVP. And then I turn around and you can hear me ask my friend who worked at the Californian. And I'm like, "Hey, is this where we started? Like, is this the hallway or the stairwell we came through?" And he's like, "Yeah." And you can just barely hear him at the bottom of the stairs. I'm like, "Okay, great." So anyways, I eventually come back down. We finish the rest of the building. And then the next day I'm listening, I'm vacuuming, and I've got my headphones on and I'm listening to all my recordings. And I'm at that point where I'm like, "Mr. Harrell, if you're here, give us a sign." And in my ears, as loud as if his lips were touching them, he says, "Back where we were." And it's so clear. I was like, "Oh my God," I'm screaming for my husband, "You gotta hear this, you gotta hear this." And I never said, you know, "Oh, he says this." It's like, "Tell me what he says." And he said the exact same thing, "Back where we were." And then I explained the story. Like, I'm asking in my head, like, "Is this where we started?" And then you hear me ask, you know, my friend, and he answers me, "Back where we were. This is where you started." It was so great. I've had some people listen to that, and nobody says that he's saying something different. It was that clear.
That's amazing.
That's the best one I've ever caught.
So do you have, like, a lot of our friends that do the recordings, they have too much footage? Do you have trouble with, like, getting through all the footage?
Yes.
It's so hard. To be a job there that people could do.
Yeah, like, right.
Probably volunteer, but
exactly. It's a lot. So even sometimes when you're filming like an overnight thing and you're trying to watch, you know, 4 screens or 6 screens, however many you have up, something's going to be missed sometimes, you know, and where do you find the time to listen to 10 hours of audio? And so, yeah, it's tough. And so it's just, after I've done an investigation, it's like, I'll try to get back to you within a few days.
Right.
And,
so you go back and you kind of give your impression of it and to whoever you worked with. And do you find that goes pretty well? People are pretty...
you know, sometimes they're disappointed because, like I said, they're so sure. And so it's always that explanation that just because I didn't find anything or capture anything doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't something there. I just wasn't able to prove that there was. So... most of the time it's disappointing. I've never had anybody say, "Oh, thank God there's nothing here," you know? And
sounds
then
like they want to find it.
Well, and I think they just want answers. And like, especially like the lady who had the high EMF.
Right.
You know, she just ended up really reaching out to a priest in Africa that they were Zooming, and
Oh, wow.
she was going down to LA to meet with someone else, and she was all in. She was gonna find somebody to prove that there was something negative in her home. So,
I mean, it's hard because your home is your oasis, and
Right.
you certainly want to feel you can go and relax and be at peace. Though I know that some people, like one of the people that came on, has they have a spirit in their house that they just kind of accept. They don't
Right.
try to like get rid of it, and they tell their friends and stuff, "Oh yeah, that's our ghost," you know. And
Right.
so, but it doesn't sound really scary. Like no one's getting hurt, no one has strange
Right.
bug bites or anything like that. So some people just live with it.
yeah, and I think that's fine. I think that, you know, spirit and people can live, you know, cohesively without bothering each other.
Yeah.
It's when it gets a little dark that I would worry. But
Is there anything you wouldn't investigate in terms of dark?
yeah, like I really don't want to touch anything that has even a sniff of being demonic. I don't want to risk that. I don't have the skills to cope with that. So I wouldn't want to put myself or anybody with me in danger if that's in fact what was going on.
I'm the same way. I don't investigate, but I have a lot of people that'll try to drag me into places with
Sure.
them. And I never watched The Exorcist. That's one of the things I'm really afraid of. I've always been afraid of
Same.
is possession. And I know it's not frequent, but I know it can happen.
Yeah.
And then spirits can also attach to you. So I respect that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different levels of wanting to, you know, deal with it, you know, and some people I think want to deal more with things. I guess whatever your limit is you know, you can say yes to and no to the other things. That seems fair.
I always try to pay attention to their stories and what they're explaining, and then just I've never. Well, I had one girl ask me, and I was like, if you think that's what it is, then I don't think that I'm your girl. So, but for the most part, nobody's ever. I've never gone into an investigation and realized that, oh, I'm in over my head. So far.
So far, yeah. Until the next one. So, does your husband investigate with you?
You know, he's usually my tech guy. And so he'll set up my cameras and he'll monitor cameras and things like that during an investigation. But a couple of weekends ago, I did a business downtown, and it was very small. And so I said, it's you and me. And I was so excited because he jumped in with both feet. He starts doing an EVP session, and it was cool. It was fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you were talking about, investigating with others. I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show, is like when people are more unconscious about the effect they're having on the location, like protocol in terms of investigating together. So what advice would you give in terms of people that want to do it together to have a good experience? What would be some perimeters you would suggest, I would say?
You know, it's funny. The first thing people ask me, oh, do you drink before? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like, please come sober. Please don't go into investigation completely schnockered. So, you know, definitely no alcohol or other substances. You want to have a clear head, and you need to be mindful that, one, your digital voice recorder is pretty much going 100% of the time, and that you're quiet, the people around you are quiet, and you really do just need to listen. And I think that sometimes people get nervous, and so they just don't want to start chatting, you know, when you get nervous. And constantly documenting like where you are and what time it is. And if you do hear something like that might sound odd on a recording, then I'm always saying, oh, that was a truck driving by, or that was so-and-so who just flushed the toilet, or whatever it might be. And then be respectful of your space. So I will always kind of walk in and do this little protective prayer. And then before I leave, it's definitely a thank you for your time. I stay here, you know, whether I've caught something or felt like there was something there anyways, or anything, and just then do a little kind of closing prayer to kind of cleanse myself and the people with me before I leave. But the number one thing, I mean, I know I said a lot of things, but the one thing is that always have permission to enter whatever premise that you're trying to investigate. So people don't understand that a lot. It's like, oh, you should do this place. And I'm like, once I have permission, I would love to, but do you know how hard it is to get into that spot?
Right.
So that's the number one thing. People are always looking for abandoned buildings, but that property is still owned by somebody.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, that makes sense. And also they can be dangerous physically.
yeah, especially with, it could be
yes,
real people that are in there. And that's even scarier to me.
Yeah, that can be true. The real people are scarier. I agree about that. So are there any places you're looking forward to investigating in the next year or two?
I don't,
or maybe want to investigate?
So one place that I have always heard stories about, but I have not been successful is, it used to be an old hospital up in Keene, and now it is a national monument for Cesar Chavez.
Oh.
Yeah. But the stories people would tell when it was an abandoned hospital would be like the minute you would go through the gate to even get onto the property, you would feel this heaviness. You would see shadow figures like in the windows. And so then I think about poor people who are docents at the Cesar Chavez National Monument. There's got to be something still going on, especially after renovations and things like that.
Sure.
So, yeah, I would really like to do that. I think my number one bucket list place to go to would be the Stanley Hotel.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. I've had friends that have gone, I've read books, and they have some amazing claims. And I think it would be incredible to experience one of those.
Now, where exactly is the Stanley Hotel?
It's the hotel from The Shining.
Oh.
It's in Estes Park, Colorado.
Ah.
Yeah. So that's my bucket list.
Ah.
Here in town, other than the hospital, I've never done the Padre. I know several investigators that will like rent a room for the night and do a little, investigating, but I don't know. Jumps forefront of my mind right now. Lots of schools. I think the Fox would be a fun place to investigate. I've never heard any claims, but I think it would be kind of neat just because of its history and the energy that surrounds theaters and things like that. They're often magnetic for some sort of paranormal activity.
There does seem to be a lot of theaters that are reportedly haunted, even if they're not proven, but that seems to be the reason why. So speaking of history, do you do research on places when you investigate, either before or after? What is your sort of way to do it?
Yeah, I really try to. So I really try to get some information about the property, previous owners, old Californian articles. So I did get permission to investigate the hotel at Pioneer Village, Kern County Museum. But I had to be able to prove that there would be a reason for there to be paranormal. So I am digging through archives of the Californian and looking up all kinds of information on the property when it was out in Taft. And I found one death in all my research. This poor guy drank himself to death.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I presented that to the staff at the museum, and they're like, okay, well, here you go. You can come in and investigate. Found nothing, but it was really cool to be at the Kern County Museum.
It sounds fun, actually. So I had something in my head and it just went out that I wanted to ask you. So when you started investigating compared to where you are now, has anything changed about your beliefs in ghosts or spirits or the afterlife? Like, how has it impacted you, or has it not really impacted you?
I wouldn't say that it's had a major impact. Like there's been like these ginormous like revelations. But I think I've just really grown as an investigator and just understand a lot more about how to go about it, and really looking at maybe the why these things are happening rather than just looking for why that it's happening. Does that make sense? So understanding things like attachments and all of that, I definitely try to do some research, and even in as far as equipment. But the biggest thing that I haven't quite figured this out yet is, how do you provide them with closure? And sometimes you don't always get to do that. And you want to put their mind at ease, but I don't come in with somebody who's a psychic medium. I can't give you that. And so it feels a little, the right word is, I don't want to say misguided because that's not correct, but it feels a little, I don't know, short-handed, I guess, because I'm going to come in and let you know whether or not I could prove that there were spirit, paranormal, or something in your home, but I can't really tell you how to resolve that. I can offer you some suggestions, but I can't help you cleanse your home or things like that. So that's something that I would like to be able to offer.
Do you think you will do that in the future, like get some other people, or are you going to teach yourself or take any classes or study?
I don't know. I think that I would try to bring somebody in and who has that experience. And I think that's a little bit hard because, again, while I'm a believer, I'm also skeptical. So I would have to really be convinced that I had that ability. That makes sense. And that's something that might be hard to prove. But so just continue to do my research so that I can at least offer them something that, you might try staging. You might try, I don't know, a psychic. But
I think
it's hard to offer that.
The idea that places have vibrations is actually pretty natural to people. I think making it paranormal is maybe just puts too much stress on it because people go to certain places because they have a beautiful energy.
Yeah.
And that's what they just think, oh, this is a nice place. And then there are people that feel creeped out in certain places without even knowing any history. Like it seems like an animal part of us. Like we kind of sense sort of danger and things like that. And so do you find yourself sensitive to the environment at all when you're either working or just in general? Or do you rely more on the evidence you get?
I always listen to my body. So you can definitely tell when energy has shifted. So you might go into a place and all of a sudden all of the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you've got a pit in your stomach, but there's no reason that you can see or experience, that you've experienced to tell you why that is. But I really, and I hear that in my body, but I really do look for the evidence as more validation.
And so do you think at this point, one of your goals would be to have enough evidence to feel you are convinced that this is real on some level, or does it not really matter to you? You just enjoy doing it and seeing where it takes you and what experiences you're going to have?
That's a great question. Both. Like I love it, even if there's nothing, I love the process. I love thinking things through, and I love working with other people and getting to know the clients. But you definitely do get disappointed when you've just spent all that time and it's like nothing, not a blip, not a bump, nothing. So, and that happened a couple of weeks ago when I did the tattoo shop downtown, and she had amazing stories. She had video footage of like artist stations being like wheeled across the floor, like so hitting another chair so loudly that their glass break alarms were going off.
Wow.
And so it caused the owner to pull up his alarm. He's looking at cameras, rewinds and sees this station being thrown across the floor.
Wow.
They won't even go in the basement because it's so dark and heavy. And this was one of those places when I first walked in, it was electric. Like the room just felt so alive. Like I can't describe it. And so we get everything set up. When we went downstairs in the basement, when we did the little walkthrough, it felt very odd down there. So I was, getting excited because I'm like, tonight we're gonna find it. And I swear, the minute you turn lights out and audio on, nothing. It was like a vacuum had completely just sucked everything out of the room, and it was just the three of us in dead silence. Like it was this. Even she said, she goes, "Why does it feel okay in here?" I'm like, I don't know, because it didn't earlier, and we all agreed to that. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a bummer, and she was incredibly disappointed because it's always so active there. And I'm like, don't be disappointed, and don't feel like you wasted my time, because I had a wonderful time, and I still have things to listen to, and maybe there'll be that one little diamond in the rough that we'll find. So
Would you consider going back?
Totally. Yeah.
'Cause maybe I wondered, that made me think, like, I wonder if there are certain hauntings where they don't want you to find them.
I
And
think
they,
that's true.
They can pull out and leave when you're there, or is it certain people's energies that open
Choices.
up the hauntings?
Possibly. I think that the second part of that is true. 100%. I do think that certain people are drawn to those experiences. My brother was that person, and he is not a psychic or anything like that. But wherever he has lived, he has experiences, feels things, sees things. And I do think that there are people who are a magnet for
Right.
spirit.
So he's not a psychic, but he has these experiences. So how does he see himself then?
I think he sees himself as a little bit of a freak. I know that sounds mean, but it scared him for a long time, and maybe there is some ability there, because we've heard from my grandmother that there were these stories of the women in the family that had these experiences, and maybe he was just so adamantly not wanting to accept it, but he doesn't like it. I know that. He doesn't like it at all.
Sometimes people with the most interesting abilities resist them. And the word psychic really just means pertaining to the psyche. And so I think there's a lot of things people can do that are psychic that we just don't know it because we think it's about just reading the mind.
Yeah.
But he's having these consistent paranormal experiences, so something in him is open to them.
Right.
And I understand the resistance to it, but that almost makes it more believable sometimes when people don't want something. They're like,
right. They're not making it up.
Maybe he gets older, he'll say, okay, let me see what this is about. Because sometimes I think it may not be what the person thinks it's about. Like, they don't necessarily have to become a medium for other people, but it shows a sensitivity. And I think a lot of people have different kinds of sensitivities. If we lived in a culture that just realized that, we would just be open at, like, just like seeing, hearing, tasting. It's just another sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
But I think if someone is being followed sort of by or paranormal stuff's happening around them, there's something going on there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Even if he thinks he's a freak, he's not a freak.
No, I don't think he's a freak either.
Seems to run in your family a little bit. So now, one of the things we do on the show is we like to promote especially women in the paranormal, because we all know the TV shows are primarily men. And a lot of recognition for the men, but women have been involved in the paranormal, especially for eons.
Yeah.
And what is your experience about being a woman in the paranormal? Do you find it's, what are the positives? What are the negatives?
To be honest, I haven't really felt that my gender has been an issue in the past. And it's funny that you say that, because I had not even thought about the fact that you're right. There really aren't very many public figures that are female investigators, or, that they're out there more publicly than the male investigators. So now I'm doing we need to change that.
Yes, we do. And that's one of our goals.
So, yeah. And it's funny because other than my husband, all of my investigators are female. So,
Yeah, I don't know when we noticed it. And what we noticed right away, there are many, many women seriously researching the paranormal for quite a while. Like, teams like you, female-led, writing about it. Yeah. Even there's not as many outlets for women. So it is an oversight. I think it'll eventually change, but it still hasn't really changed. And also they get sort of like put into specific roles on television, like the medium's a woman.
Right.
You don't see the women as the tech.
Leading the team or doing
and they're doing it. And they've been doing it. They're doing the tech stuff. They're very capable. And so that's the reason we would like to see it change, to reflect what's actually been going on, is they've been doing it.
Yeah.
And not to typecast. That's the word, typecast.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great.
So even though I like some of the shows for sure, and I know there's at least one that has like a lead investigator, but we want to support women, because they're taking it seriously too. And they, like I said, they've been involved with the spiritual world for a long, long time. That's the one area they were allowed to be involved.
Right. Back to the spiritualism days, right? Yeah.
So yes, now we can potentially become president, but before we couldn't. So where would we go? We had to work in other realms.
Right. Be creative. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of my theories too, is that was an open field for women, and they could embrace it fully, and it was fine. It was okay for them to do it. So then they spent a lot of time in it. And just like over decades, they learned things about.
Right.
But it also seems, one of the things, my opinion, about women that they have an advantage is talking to people. A lot of times people will open up a little more. And again, that's probably a stereotype thing, but it can work for women as investigators.
But I think that's true. And as you started to talk, I was thinking too, is that maybe we're just more sensitive to their emotions, of a client or things like that. And I do think that I connect really well with people, and I still get messages from them all the time. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Did they ever follow up and say it's still happening, or?
I do check up, and one gal says that things have been better, at her house. And then I don't know about the doctor. I've not been able to get in touch with her again. And then the other family just said they really try to go at it with that skeptic lens. Like, let's see if we can disprove it. Did the voices come from on the street, or did the voices come from the bedroom? Kind of
right.
a thing. So, yeah.
Now, I know that I'm not sure what kind of stories that you've investigated that of deaths of people, but sometimes I have found listening to the stories of who died are very sad, and they really stick with me, even though I didn't even investigate.
Right.
Do you ever find that the story of someone's death or tragedy itself, the story kind of haunts you besides, the actual haunting?
Well, the one woman that I told you about, the doctor whose mother died in the home, she took her own life. And so I remembered, that has stuck with me. None of the other places that I have been were known deaths. My grandpa died in the house or things like that. Oh, I take that back. There was one other. And so you do think about those things. And I think about the client and how that must have felt, to come home and find your mom, and the trauma, that it causes. And then at the other house, both her husband and her mother-in-law passed away in the home. And that's absolutely who she felt was there. And we did get a little bit of evidence that spoke to the fact that they might be. So it's interesting when you hear the stories, then you walk through the home and you see the pictures of these people on the wall, and then you're putting a face with name. But I don't know that it sticks with me as far as I think about it often, or it's affected me emotionally in some way. I do try to keep a little bit of distance in that regard because I'm a super emotional person. So if I focus too much on that, then it would probably affect the way that I would investigate sometimes. So
sure. Well, it seems like there's an interesting relationship that a good investigator has with both the dead and the living, and learning how to sort of be the bridge through the investigation, through listening to their stories. And I know one of the big things for remembering people and remembering stories, like listening to some of the other paranormal, shows, they talk about stories where people might have been really harmed. They want to remember them and honor them. And I think that's really kind of beautiful, that they want to tell their story and that to know that they are heard. And I think even if that doesn't happen paranormal wise, it's still really a great gesture.
Yeah, totally.
Trying to heal the past.
Exactly. And I think there is some closure there for, the person that's honoring them. And sometimes for spirit, if it's there, that there is that forgiveness sense, maybe. Oh, but there's a total connection between people and the paranormal or spirit or whatever you want to refer to it as. Everybody calls it something different, but I don't know. My thought just left my brain. But.
That happens to me too.
Yeah.
I hate that. Now, have you ever had any encounters with animals in the spirit world, or personally, or investigating, or stories about? I think there was a story about a German Shepherd somewhere in Bakersfield that's supposed to be
that's
a spirit.
I think that is the security guard at the Bakersfield Californian. And so there's the old security guard and his German Shepherd that they say that sometimes you can find like down in the basement area or in the stairwell. So I have not, other than I recently lost my dog.
Aw.
And I swear to you, I see her standing at my back door when I get home from work every time I come home.
Oh.
And I'm always like, oh, Scarlet Louise, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, she's not there. But I see her out of the corner of my eye every time I walk by that dang door. So
I believe you. I know Michael, my husband, used to see our cat that passed, this little black cat, and he would see her sometimes too. And then we've had my favorite story is a friend of ours who is absolutely convinced that this cat that died reincarnated into this dog's body. And she had asked the cat to do that. She wanted the cat to be, and she's not a crazy kind of person. Like she's very open spiritually, but she's a very grounded person, very go-getter, And she said the dog has the same behaviors as that cat did.
Oh,
and they're very
that's
specific.
fascinating.
So
that's really neat.
Yeah, I think there's probably more going on with animals and people, and you probably are seeing your dog.
Maybe. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Because I do think that there is such a strong connection between us and our animals. I mean, they really become a huge part of our lives. And when they leave us, they still love us too. They still want to make sure we're okay because that's their job, right?
Yeah.
Love us unconditionally. And so I have no doubt that they stick around sometimes.
And they do seem to see and hear things that aren't there a lot of times. This same cat we had was a little black cat. And one time in our apartment, middle of the night, she rarely did this. She was like, I woke up and she was meowing at something in the middle of the room, like meow, 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 meow. And it was the only time she ever did it. It was like she was explaining something or telling someone, whatever it was. She's the boss. I don't know. But I'll never forget it. And I didn't have a camera. It would have been great to video it. But I think they see things, too, that we can't see.
Yeah. My mom had a little Porky. And it was at the point where my brother was living at home with my mom and dad still. My dad was out of town. My brother was out. And she was in her room upstairs. And Jojo was the dog, was sitting on the end of her bed. And my mom heard the front door open and close, so she assumed that my brother was home. She heard the footsteps coming up the stairs, and the dog is on the corner of the bed, staring at her bedroom door, just growling, just like that deep guttural, And my mom calls out to my brother, no answer. She calls out a little louder, still no answer. The dog is at this point jumping off the bed and barking at the door, and she hears his bedroom door open and close. And so she gets up and she goes to his bedroom door, which is literally 8 feet from her door. She leans into it and she can hear conversation in the room. And so she knocks and the conversation stops and she opens the door and there was no one there. But the dog sensed somebody there. She heard somebody there. So, I think that dogs are sort of like children, small children who see things and talk to things, and because they just don't know, I don't want to say no better, but you know what I mean, is that they haven't been disciplined to those things aren't real comment. So I think dogs are that way too, or cats. Just open to it.
So I think you're probably the first person we've had on this show that has worked with kids. And
oh yeah.
And do you find they're a little more open too, even though they're not children, but they're not adults? Did you find when you're investigating that they were open to things or maybe sensitive just naturally? Did they feel safe to tell you things maybe that they might not tell their parents?
I think that there is definitely a level of trust there with these kids, and they take their roles so seriously. I didn't necessarily have anyone that specifically was more attuned to energy or something than someone else, but I don't know. They just that they took it so seriously. That's the best thing, and they were so willing and ready to learn how to do this and how to approach it, that it was just truly a joy. Like I really loved it. And the young lady I told you about that was the president of that club, she went on to study psychology. So when she came back from school and started investigating with me, it was super helpful because in one sense, this person was, one of the clients was having, when you dream, but you're awake.
Lucid dreaming? No. Oh, wait.
Oh my gosh. It just completely went away.
What that's called.
Anyways, he was having these, night terrors.
Oh, night terrors.
Okay.
Right.
I knew it was going to come to me eventually. He was having these night terrors and, but she was able to, talk to him privately a little bit about, consequences, I guess, or symptoms that might occur after having night terrors, or why you might have them. And so it made a lot of sense to some of the claims that he was making in the house. So it was nice to have that background. But.
Oh, so it really helped her knowledge and understanding, gave it a different sort of perspective, and she was able to sort of see things that you might have missed, it sounds like.
Right. So she was great at that.
So you now currently, do you still have a team that you investigate with? Is it more like you kind of create it as you go?
It was nice to have a kind of a steady team for a while, but there's been marriages and moves and surgeries, and so that is kind of fallen apart at the moment. But I do always have my husband and my son will go with me sometimes. So it's kind of nice to investigate with people that on that level, because we can kind of read each other's minds. Like he knows where I want to set things up, and he knows how to get that done down there. And it's not as much coaching as far as put here and we're going to stand here and the two of us are going to go here. So there's a lot of things I don't have to explain, but always looking for someone that could be consistent. And sometimes I will just take, you have people who always say, oh, I want to go sometime. I get that all the time. And so occasionally I will take somebody with me who has never done something like that and just kind of coach them through it. And it's kind of funny to see them so excited and then in the moment, like a little bit terrified. One of my friends, she's super chatty, like doesn't know a stranger. And so she was like, yeah, I want to go. Say a word the entire night. Just looking at her device the whole time. And I was like, do you want to ask a question? She goes, no, thank you. And so I asked her, I go, did you absolutely hate that? And she goes, I was just praying the whole time. Do not attach to me. You cannot come home with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so silly. Oh yeah, everybody's different.
So if someone wanted to contact you about a haunted place or home, how would they reach you?
You can reach me on Facebook through Frontier Ghost Hunters, and my number is there, or you can message me, and that's how I get most of my contacts. So,
and we can put that on our website too, the Facebook contacts.
Absolutely,
we'll keep it up there. That's what we usually do. So we're getting close to the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to sort of leave people with? Any advice or anything at all connected to your experiences?
Just be open and try not to be afraid. Like, I just don't think that it's always evil, that sometimes we just can't explain it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So,
that's a really good point, because I think a lot of the TV shows make it seem like it's always dark
they're out
and
to get you,
scary.
Right?
Yeah. And, so you're right. It doesn't have to be scary or evil, and having that sense of curiosity. So, but thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure, and I learned a lot, and it was really great to hear your stories. With Bakersfield High especially was really a fun one.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So thank you all for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a spooky October.